The so-called Islamic Golden Age is often heralded as a period of immense intellectual and cultural achievement, but a closer examination reveals a more skeptical view. Many of the great minds of this era, whose contributions are often attributed to the influence of Islam, were in reality individuals who found themselves at odds with the very religious and political structures that claimed them as their own. The brilliance of these scholars was not a product of Islamic doctrine. Rather, it often thrived despite it, flourishing in the margins, in the shadows cast by a dominant religious orthodoxy that frequently sought to suppress or control them. Take Avicenna, for example, a towering figure in medicine and philosophy. Born in Afshona, he authored the Canon of Medicine, a text that would guide medical practice for centuries. Yet, his philosophical views, which drew heavily on Greek thought, were seen as heretical by many Islamic scholars. Avicenna was imprisoned, not celebrated, by his contemporaries, an indication that his greatness was in spite of, rather than because of, his Islamic environment. Al-Razi, another luminary from Iran, was a pioneer in medicine. His works, including Al-Hawi, were groundbreaking, but his rational approach and open critique of religious dogma earned him the label of heretic. Al-Razi's commitment to science and reason often put him at odds with the very religious authorities that would later claim him as a product of an Islamic Renaissance. Then there is Al-Kindi, known as the philosopher of the Arabs. His efforts to reconcile Greek philosophy with Islamic thought were groundbreaking, but his critiques of the Quran drew ire from Orthodox circles. Al-Kindi faced persecution, his work censored, and his contributions minimized in his own time, a stark contrast to the reverence with which he is viewed today. Jabir ibn Hayyan, often hailed as the father of chemistry, was another figure who found himself on the wrong side of Islamic orthodoxy. His alchemical pursuits were frequently dismissed as sorcery, and accusations of witchcraft dogged his career. Like so many others, Jabir's work flourished not because of Islamic teachings, but in defiance of the superstitions that pervaded the religious landscape. Al-Farabi, a philosopher from Wasij, Kazakhstan, made significant contributions to logic, philosophy, and music. Yet his rationalist views were met with accusations of atheism. His work, though celebrated today, was considered subversive in his time, challenging the very religious structures that are now credited with fostering his genius. Ibn al-Haytham, a pioneer in optics from Basra, Iraq, introduced the scientific method long before it was a staple of modern science. Yet his commitment to empirical truth over religious doctrine earned him the title the Great Heretic, and he spent years under house arrest. His pursuit of knowledge was seen as a threat, not a triumph, of the Islamic world. Ibn Mukaffa, a translator and scholar from Gorgan, Iran, played a crucial role in bringing Persian knowledge into the Arabic world. Yet his translations and ideas were considered heretical, leading to his execution. His fate underscores the dangerous line scholars had to walk. One misstep, one idea too bold, and they were branded enemies of the faith. The Thabit ibn Qurra, a Sabian scientist from Harran, Turkey, made monumental contributions to mathematics and astronomy. His religious affiliation outside of Islam, however, made him a target, and his works were often dismissed by Orthodox scholars. His achievements, though now celebrated, were achieved in the face of significant religious opposition. Averroes, a philosopher and jurist from Córdoba, Spain, was an Aristotelian whose interpretations of Islamic law led to his banishment. His rationalism was at odds with the religious orthodoxy of his time, and his work was not widely accepted until centuries later, and even then more so in the West than in the Islamic world. Al-Biruni, born in Khwarezm, Uzbekistan, was a polymath who excelled in many fields, from astronomy to history. His critical and independent thinking often placed him at odds with Islamic authorities. Al-Biruni's intellectual pursuits were not nurtured by Islam, but were rather a personal quest that often clashed with the religious norms of his society. Al-Ma'ari, a blind poet from Syria, is remembered for his sharp critiques of religious dogma and societal norms. His bitter irony and skepticism made him a controversial figure, accused of blasphemy and ostracized by many. His courage to question and critique reflects a mind unshackled by the constraints of religious dogma. Ibn Khaldun, the Tunisian scholar who laid the groundwork for modern sociology and historiography, was often sidelined during his lifetime. His work, groundbreaking as it was, did not align with the religious or political powers of his day. His brilliance was recognized only later, and not by the Islamic scholars of his era. Ibn Hazm, from Córdoba, Spain, was a prolific writer on Islamic jurisprudence, theology, and love. Yet his passionate defenses of his ideas frequently led to conflicts with religious authorities. He was ostracized and his works were burned, a fate that highlights the precarious position of those who dared to think differently within an Islamic framework. Al-Ghazali from Tus, Iran, is often seen as a towering figure in Islamic theology and Sufism. However, his embrace of Sufism, a mystical and often unorthodox branch of Islam, put him at odds with more rigid Islamic scholars. His work, while now considered a cornerstone of Islamic thought, was controversial in its time. Ibn Tufayl from Guadix, Spain, was a philosopher and novelist whose explorations of reason and self-discovery often clashed with conservative Islamic thinkers. His works were celebrated more in the West than in the Islamic world, where his ideas were considered too radical for widespread acceptance. Ibn al-Nafis from Damascus, Syria, made significant contributions to medicine, including the discovery of pulmonary circulation. His work, which challenged existing medical theories, was not fully appreciated until centuries later, suggesting that his ideas were too advanced and perhaps too secular for his time. Al-Khwarizmi from Khwarezm, Uzbekistan, laid the foundations for algebra and algorithms. While his work is often claimed as a triumph of Islamic science, the reality is that his achievements were largely independent of Islamic teachings and were more a reflection of the practical needs of the time, rather than a product of religious inspiration. Al-Mutanabi, the celebrated poet from Kufa, Iraq, used his eloquence and wit to navigate the complex political landscape of his time. His boldness in challenging rulers and societal norms often led to exile, illustrating that his greatness was recognized more for its defiance than its conformity to Islamic ideals. When we examine the lives of these scholars, a pattern emerges. They were often persecuted, ostracized, or silenced by the very religious structures that later claimed their achievements as part of an Islamic Golden Age. The irony is that Mecca, the heart of Islam, was never a beacon of scientific exploration or discovery. The true legacy of these scholars lies not in their adherence to Islamic teachings, but in their willingness to push against the boundaries imposed by those teachings. Their brilliance was not a gift of Islam, but a triumph over the limitations and dogmas of their time. The so-called Islamic Golden Age then had little to do with Islam itself and everything to do with the individuals who dared to think beyond its constraints.